step back with me for a moment. We're going to act as witnesses today to an ancient, profound tragedy. We're stepping into this explainer to look closely, really closely, at the frayed, blood-soaked threads of a single garment that literally tore a family to pieces. We're not just looking at a piece of clothing today. We are examining an artifact of profound, world-altering sorrow. The scripture records a narrative so rich, so heavily shadowed by human frailty, that we can't just be distant observers here. We have to be history's quiet witnesses. So picture the grand, sweeping winds of the ancient Near East. Feel the dry dust blowing across a desolate, sun-baked landscape. Now, we're gonna zoom in. We are pulling the camera right down to the microscopic weave of a vibrant, impossibly colorful fabric to see exactly how the purest expression of a father's love transformed into a horrific instrument of unspeakable cruelty.
You really have to ask yourself, how does a symbol of ultimate, unconditional love become a one-way ticket to the underworld? Plunge with me right into the blinding, oppressive heat of the Canaanite sun. This is where the Bible records a chilling tale of how heavy, undeniable favoritism breeds a slow, meticulous kind of murder. We are stepping into an expansive, sun-scorched world, a place where the light is harsh and the shadows fall incredibly long and dark. You see, this kind of malice doesn't just explode out of nowhere, it ferments. It requires the slow, agonizing drip, drip, drip of daily inequality. We are going to examine the precise anatomy of this betrayal, and we're going to trace this devastating descent from a bright, sunlit pasture down into the darkest, most terrifying subterranean depths imaginable. So let's look at the sheer weight of the sheer favoritism, and how a simple gift from a father became entirely fatal. Look at the contrast here. On the left side, we have this pristine, vibrant fabric woven with immense, painstaking care. And then on the right, look at the calloused, dirt-crusted, bruised hands of older brothers. The scripture records that Jacob, the aging patriarch, channels his overwhelming affection for the child of his old age into a deeply physical object. This isn't just a warm piece of clothing to keep the chill of the desert night away. No, it's a crown woven of thread. It is a heavy, inescapable mantle of superiority, placed squarely onto the narrow shoulders of a 17-year-old boy. The Bible details the creation of this coat as a deliberate act of elevation. It set one son entirely apart from the rest of his own flesh and blood. Think about the older brothers for a second. They have spent their entire lives wrestling rams, pulling sheep out of thorny thickets. Their skin is baked by the unrelenting sun, cracked by the dry wind. They carry the harsh, physical toll of their labor deep in every single callus. And into this gritty, sweat-soaked, dust-choked reality steps Joseph, draped in brilliant, untouched colors. Imagine the glaring light catching that fabric. It was a walking, glowing reminder that Joseph was completely exempt from their harsh reality. It was a daily, visual assault on their dignity. And the tension just builds. The scripture tells us they could not speak peaceably unto him. This single coat severed every tie of brotherhood. It bred a silent, festering venom, where they refused to utter even a single peaceful word in his direction. I want you to picture the family encampment as the sun dips below the horizon, the sky bruised purple and orange, the crackle of the campfire, the sharing of the evening meal. It should be a place of warmth. Yet, the moment Joseph approaches, the atmosphere instantly freezes. The casual brotherly banter literally dies in their throats. This was a chilling, absolute emotional blockade. They don't just disagree with him, they actively, purposefully strip him of basic human warmth. The air grows incredibly thick with a heavy, deliberate silence. Every single time that colorful coat shimmers in the firelight, you can practically see the brothers' jaws clench tighter. Their eyes drop down to the dirt, actively cultivating the poison spreading in their own hearts. And if the coat wasn't enough, we then move into the whispers of the stars and how the dreamer provoked them even further. Because if the coat was the physical kindling, Joseph's dreams were the gasoline poured directly onto the roaring fire of their jealousy. We move right now from the tangible, earthy reality of a woven garment into the surreal, boundless realm of the subconscious. The earthly tension was suddenly amplified by divine visions. Joseph, who was perhaps entirely naive to the lethal danger of his brother's absolute silence, actually opens his mouth to share what he has seen in the night. The scripture shows us these are grand, cosmic blueprints of a future hierarchy that completely shatters the existing patriarchal order. Just listen to the raw venom in the brothers' voices as Joseph shares a dream of their wheat sheaves bowing down to his. They interpreted this vision as a brazen, arrogant theft of their birthright, asking, "Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us?" Let's visualize the micro details of this confrontation. Put it in slow motion. Joseph is vividly describing the harvest field. He sees his own sheaf of wheat standing tall and upright in the center. Then, in his dream, the brothers' sheaves gather around and physically bend, bowing down to the earth. Watch the older brothers as they hear this. They grip their heavy wooden shepherd's staffs, their knuckles turned completely white. To them, this isn't just some silly dream. It is an unforgivable declaration of war. The dreamer. That became a mocked label, an insult used by the brothers to reduce Joseph from a human sibling into an intolerable visionary. When Joseph dreamed a second time, this time of the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him, the Bible records that even his father rebuked him, yet Jacob kept the saying quietly in his heart. I mean, think about the scale of this. Now even the celestial bodies are bowing to this teenager in the colorful coat. The sun and moon, which are clear symbols of his father and mother, are brought to their knees in this vision. We see Jacob, the towering patriarch, sharply reprimanding his favorite son, trying desperately to restore some semblance of order. But a subtle, profound detail emerges here in the text. Jacob turns away and quietly holds on to those words. He ponders them. The brothers, however, do absolutely no such thing. They strip him of his given name, they replace it with a sarcastic, dehumanizing title. He's no longer their flesh and blood brother, he is simply the dreamer. He's a walking target, painted in brilliant colors against the drab desert backdrop. Now, we trace his steps into the Dothan wilderness to witness the precise anatomy of an ambush. We shift our gaze now to the vast, utterly desolate landscape of Dothan. Sweeping winds carry the distant sight of a solitary, colorful figure approaching. We leave the familiar, safe valleys behind and enter the sprawling, unforgiving expanse of the open wilderness. I want the camera of your mind to pull way, way back to a grand, cinematic wide shot. Miles of rugged, broken terrain, bleached stone, and a massive empty sky. And right there, walking all alone into this immense desolation, is a tiny speck of vibrant color. The scripture records how they watched him approach from afar. This distance gave them ample time in the dead silence of the desert to let their malice crystallize into a firm death sentence. Let's slow time down completely right here. Imagine the intense heat shimmer rising off the dry earth. A brother squints into the glaring sun. The blur of colors slowly, agonizingly resolves into the unmistakable pattern of that hated coat. As Joseph walks those long, dusty, exhausting miles toward them, the brothers are standing shoulder to shoulder. They are tracking his every single step. Minutes tick by in agonizing slow motion. The whispers begin. The plan takes its dark shape, solidifying from a bitter fantasy into a cold, concrete, lethal objective. They simply stand and watch their prey walk willingly right into the snare.
Let us slay him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. Notice the chilling, calculated logic in their conspiracy. They genuinely believed that by obliterating his physical flesh, they could permanently mock and unwrite the destiny of his prophecies. The scripture records a deeply philosophical malice taking root here. This isn't just sibling rivalry. This is an intentional war against destiny itself. They want to prove, once and for all, that the celestial visions were nothing more than the arrogant delusions of a spoiled child. They're formulating the ultimate test, right there in the dirt. If we stop his heart, if we literally tear the breath from his lungs, the stars will never, ever bow to him. It is a direct, violent challenge to the divine narrative, spoken right into the dry desert air. I want to slow down this next agonizing moment to a microscopic crawl. The rough hands violently stripping the silk from his shoulders, erasing his identity before hurling him into the darkness. The Bible details the terrifying, explosive immediacy of their violence. Joseph arrives. He's likely exhausted from the journey, expecting water, maybe a brotherly greeting. Instead, the air is suddenly thick with violence. Watch this frame by frame. Before he can even utter a word, those hardened, dirt-crusted hands lunge forward. They grab the delicate, vibrant fabric. I want you to almost hear the sickening rip of the silk tearing, thread by thread snapping as they forcefully, angrily strip the garment from his back. This is a brutal deconstruction of who he is. They are violently peeling away his father's love, literally stripping his status from his body. Then comes the physical, forceful shove, the sudden, terrifying weightlessness of falling, and then the sickening thud at the bottom of the deep shaft as flesh and bone meet the unyielding, jagged stone of the earth. We follow him on that descent into the pit, down into the waterless dark. The scripture explicitly notes the pit was completely empty. There was no water in it.
Though the Bible records Reuben making a faint attempt to stall the actual murder by suggesting they throw him in the pit instead of shedding his blood, his weak mercy is entirely swallowed up by the suffocating, waterless dark. The grand, wide expanse of the open Dothan wilderness vanishes entirely in an instant. The entire world is compressed into a narrow, vertical shaft of carved stone. The scripture details the terrifying claustrophobia of this very moment. Joseph looks up, his vision restricted to a tiny, distant, mocking circle of blinding blue sky. The walls are sheer, scraping his skin. The air grows immediately cooler, heavy with the scent of damp, dead earth and decay. Up above, the brothers' faces briefly eclipse the sun as they peer down upon their work, their dark shadows falling over his bruised body like a physical weight. There is no water to cool his throat, a throat that is rapidly growing raw from screaming for mercy. There is only the dry, suffocating dust. We see the eldest brother, Reuben, attempting a desperate secret negotiation with his own conscience, hoping to somehow return later and pull the boy from the earth, but his half-measure is completely powerless against the collective fury of the group. Down there, the silence of the pit is absolute, broken only by the horrifying sounds drifting down from the surface. The casual sounds of his brothers sitting down to eat a meal just yards away from his earthen tomb. And as they eat, the scene shifts to 20 pieces of silver and a chillingly cold calculation. As they sat down to eat, literally ignoring the muffled cries coming from below, the distant bells of an Ishmaelite caravan signaled a massive shift. The fiery rage abruptly turns into cold, calculated commerce. The explosive, violent energy of the sudden ambush dissipates, and it's replaced by something entirely more sinister. Listen for it. We hear the rhythmic, approaching chime of camel bells ringing out across the desert dunes. The brothers pause their meal. They look toward the hazy horizon. The arrival of these merchants acts as a catalyst, completely transforming a family dispute into a commercial opportunity. The blazing heat of their anger cools into the absolute zero of calculated greed. Judah asks, "What profit is it if we slay our brother?" That haunting question just hangs there in the desert air. It entirely strips their brother of his humanity, transforming him into pure, tradable inventory. Judah looks at the caravan, then looks toward the dark hole of the pit, and runs a cold economic equation right there in his mind. The Bible shows us that blood, while deeply satisfying to their rage, yields absolutely no financial return. Listen to the horrifying pragmatism in his voice. He literally argues that killing their own flesh and blood is simply bad business. In this very breath, the beloved son of Jacob ceases to be a human being entirely. He becomes a commodity, an asset to be liquidated for a handful of coins. 20. Stare at this number. This is the exact petty price of a human soul, weighed out in pieces of silver. Listen to the heavy, metallic clank of a brother being traded away into Egyptian slavery. They pull him up from the claustrophobic darkness of the pit, hauling him out into the blinding light, only to immediately plunge him into a completely different kind of abyss. The merchants ruthlessly examine the boy. A price is negotiated right over his head, exactly as if he were a sack of grain or a frightened, captured animal. The scripture records the cold, physical exchange. 20 hard silver coins, dropped one by one into the calloused hands of his own flesh and blood. Every single clink of metal against metal is the sound of a sacred family bond being severed forever. The brothers greedily count their profit, while Joseph is bound tightly, looking back over his shoulder in sheer terror as the camels begin their long, relentless march toward the towering pyramids of Egypt. But the story doesn't leave the desert. We turn to the blood-stained lie and a father's ultimate despair. The deed is done, but the scripture shows us that their monstrous crime demands an equally monstrous cover-up to bring back to their father. The caravan disappears over the horizon, taking the dreamer far away, but the physical symbol of the father's favoritism remains lying right there in the dust. The brothers stand alone in the immense wilderness, holding the torn silk. The absolute silence of the desert now demands an explanation. They know they cannot return to the encampment empty-handed. They must engineer a fiction so absolute, so devastatingly convincing that Jacob will never, ever come looking for the boy. I want you to watch this gruesome choreography unfold in incredibly slow motion. A knife flashes in the harsh desert sun. The innocent goat falls to the earth. They take the coat of many colors, that pristine, brilliant, deeply loved garment, and they plunge it into the pooling liquid. Watch their hands. They are deliberately, meticulously kneading the thick, hot red blood deep, deep into the woven fibers of the very coat that originally sparked their hatred. They are painting a horrifying picture of a savage animal attack. Every single stain they press into that silk is a deliberate, calculated stroke of psychological warfare. It is designed with one goal, to completely and utterly shatter their father's heart. "It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces." Feel the devastating whiplash here as the Bible records Jacob's agonizing wail. It completely shatters the quiet of the camp as he holds the ruined garment in his trembling hands. The brothers walk up and simply hand the dripping, stiff fabric to their aging father. They don't even have to speak the lie out loud. They let the blood-soaked silk do the terrible talking for them. The scripture records Jacob's eyes widening in pure, unadulterated terror. He recognizes the complex weave. He recognizes the once vibrant colors, now darkened, crusty, and stiffened with blood. His knees literally give way beneath him. His cry of absolute, unfiltered despair echoes through the entire camp. It is the raw sound of a man's soul being torn entirely in two. And the scripture says he refused to be comforted. There is a profound, deeply dark irony operating right here. The patriarch who built his youth on a deceptive garment is now utterly destroyed by a bloody tunic. We are witnessing the deepest, darkest form of grief. It's a grief that actively builds a stone wall against any word of solace. His children, the very ones who caused this, gather around him, offering empty, hypocritical condolences, but he turns his face to the wall. The Bible shows a staggering literary symmetry in this moment. Decades prior, Jacob himself had used the skin of a goat and the garments of his older brother to deceive his own blind father Isaac. Now the cycle of deception returns with devastating surgical precision. His sons use the blood of a goat and the garment of his favored son to plunge him into a total blindness of grief. The grand deceiver has become the ultimate victim of a woven, blood-stained lie.
Jacob cries out, "I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning." Let the raw, suffocating tragedy of this vow linger in the air for a moment. A father wrapping himself in rough sackcloth, actively choosing to reside in the shadow of death. The scripture records a man making a conscious, deliberate decision to stop living, even as his heart stubbornly continues to beat in his chest. He tears his own fine clothes, replacing them with a rough, stinging, uncomfortable fabric of sackcloth. Jacob binds himself to the darkness. He declares that his only remaining destination is the underworld, the cold grave where he believes his mangled, broken son is waiting for him. The coat of many colors, which was initially intended to be a glowing beacon of extreme favor, has successfully draped the entire family in the suffocating, inescapable shroud of mourning and deceit.
So we have to ask ourselves, can a dream really be silenced by silver and blood? As the Bible records Joseph being dragged in heavy iron chains toward the looming, massive shadow of the Egyptian pyramids, heading to the house of Potiphar, we are left wondering if the terrifying darkness of the pit was actually the end of his story, or merely a brutal, necessary beginning. Back in the land of Canaan, the brothers return to their flocks. They are entirely convinced they have permanently rewritten destiny. They truly believe the heavy dirt of the pit, the 20 silver coins, and the goat's blood on the silk have successfully assassinated the dreamer and his visions. But as the immense, sun-baked stone monuments of Egypt rise on the horizon before the chained, bruised teenage boy, we must ask ourselves if this violent, unimaginable descent is actually the exact, precise mechanism required to elevate a teenage boy to the right hand of Pharaoh. The coat is gone, the blood has dried in the desert sun, but the dream remains entirely intact.